a lot of people assume that homelessness is, or that mental illness is the cause of homelessness. And in some cases, that might be true. But in
Mhm.
my experience and talking to other people, homelessness is absolutely a cause of mental illness. It takes a lot of inner strength to not let it just take you.
Is the show for me and you, the one you love to listen to. And ooh, you got your friends, see it through. See, 'cause laughter is medicine too.
Hello, my name is 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐬, producer of The Edge Show, an award-winning television show and podcast.
Hey, I'm Wendy Love Edge, writer and co-host of The Edge Show. This is season 7, episode 6, part 2 in our series about homelessness. The opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of Edge Productions. How are you doing tonight, Angela?
I'm doing pretty good, I think, so far. That's my answer every week,
And
by the way. We could just
you,
cut and paste. I'm
uh-huh,
doing pretty good so far, I
so
think.
far.
We could cut and paste that every week if you wanted.
There you go. Perfect. Well, it's good that you're consistent,
Something for that, I guess. So how
You
are
get
you
2
doing?
points. 2 points for being consistent. How about that?
All right. What is that, 2 points out of 10?
I don't know. I just
What?
made it up. I'm making it up as I go along.
All right.
I'm
That's
doing pretty
life.
well. I would
Yeah.
say. Yes. Bit tired, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. But I'm hanging in there. I'm going to get a little extra sleep this weekend, I think. We are talking about homelessness again this week.
Yeah.
And I wanted to continue the conversation. There's so many facets and aspects to the homelessness issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like we couldn't really do it in just one show. One of the things that came up in the interview that you're going to see in a little while this week is the idea of how vulnerable people are when they're homeless. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking about that a lot. We talked about it a little bit last week, and you disclosed some of your vulnerabilities
Mm-hmm.
when you were in that position. And, I just think that people often feel sort of desperate. They feel they don't have the comfort of a home.
Yeah.
And so frequently, they're offered various things to help them in their situation, but the people may not have the best of intentions. And it really has kind of haunted me since doing the interview, and we talked about that.
Right. Well,
Um,
I just sometimes wonder, like, who do you trust when you're asking for help or
mhm.
when someone is offering help?
Right,
Because in my experience, many predators seem to put themselves in savior mode
right.
and they show up like they're going to fix everything.
Hmm.
And you're like, oh, finally, some reprieve.
Right,
But they end up being predators.
right.
So it's really hard.
Hmm.
I mean, not only are you fighting for just a stable environment to sleep in, eat in, live in,
Hmm.
then you also have to be wary about who you accept help from.
Right. And we talked about this extensively in preparation for these shows because, um, you know, the religious persecution that you suffered gives you kind of almost a hair trigger for these organizations, I think, where
Mm-hmm.
you're very leery, and I don't blame you at all. And
Right.
it's something that, before knowing you, I never really thought about that very much.
You're like, oh,
Um,
they just want to help people.
right. I do realize, that many of these organizations, things come out later where they're abusing people,
Mm-hmm.
not even helping them or giving, any kind of monetary help or
Right.
material help, um, but collecting donations. And frequently, many religious organizations do this, and they
Mm-hmm.
use it as a means to kind of pull people into the church, right?
Oh, we're gonna get some hate now.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm saying it, and it
Right.
was something that I never really thought about until I got to know you very well. And I remember one time we had a friend who was struggling, and she said to me, well, I thought about going to, the food pantry. It was
Hmm.
in Fayetteville, but she
Right.
told me that most of them were at churches and she
Yeah.
wasn't comfortable
Their
going into the
main goal
church.
is to get parishioners to come to their
Mhm.
church.
Right.
Well, I mean, for instance, when Dad passed away, right? He was a preacher here in Fayetteville, and the new preacher came in, and the first thing they did, because they want people to come to their church.
Mm-hmm.
I know this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about helping people. They want to look like they're being the good Samaritans, and they went out to feed the homeless. But
Mm-hmm.
then they get the homeless people to come to their church,
So,
and then they put those homeless people to work in the church for free.
mhm. Right. Right. There's lots of issues in that, all that you just said.
There's, I mean, I know that there's more to it than that, and there's many people who really think that they're doing a great service, and maybe they are for some people, but it's just, it seems like it's ripe for predators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also one thing that I noticed in those situations is frequently I see photos on social media of homeless
Mm-hmm.
people who are being helped. Do they really want their photo? Maybe they want the food that's being provided or assistance that's being
Mm-hmm.
provided, and now they feel obligated to have their photo,
Right. Or
on
they're
the social
atheists,
media.
or they're
Mhm,
Jewish, or any other
mhm.
religion. They feel like they have to let these people pray for them to their God or whatever,
Right. Out of
so that
politeness,
these people
and
have something to eat or a place to stay. It doesn't come without condition in many situations.
right. And so it's really important to realize that when people are homeless, they are vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also really important to realize that there are many secular organizations that do offer help. We're going to put some of those on the
Right.
screen. I found an article, The 7 Best Charities for Helping Homeless People, complete list for 2022. The National Alliance to End Homelessness is number 1. Coalition for the Homeless, Chicago Coalition for the
Mm-hmm.
Homeless, National Homelessness Law Center. So there are plenty of secular organizations out
Okay.
there. Now,
And I'm not saying that those places don't also have their problems, but it
mhm,
doesn't seem like they're holding people who need help captive. You know, like, we will
right.
give you this food if you pray to our God, or we will give you this food if you clean up our church every Sunday, or we will give you this food if you let us take your picture to promote our church. It should not be conditional in any way.
Right. And I don't think it's so blatant, and maybe someone who was raised Christian and feels comfortable with that wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
even think twice about it,
Right.
and even be happy about it. And that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's wonderful. There are many people, other people like me who was not raised Christian,
Mm-hmm.
or like you that does not identify as a Christian, who would be very uncomfortable, even though you're vulnerable and without a home. You still have your own values, your own morals, your own idea of what's right and what's wrong. And it is really hard when you're hungry or cold or too hot,
Yeah.
and you just want some help. But I think it's really important to think about these issues, to look for organizations where you won't have to feel uncomfortable, to the
Right.
best of your ability.
Or if you're a religious organization who's trying to help people in need, just make
Mhm.
sure that the help isn't conditional in any
Right.
way, or
Mhm.
that you don't push your religion on them.
Right. And you brought up a point about bartering for with a religious organization,
Mm-hmm.
like cleaning the church in exchange for a place to stay or some food. Um, I don't really like that either. I think that when people have money and privilege, they can just go wherever they want to go. They don't have to do extra work for it.
Unless you're going to hire
Mhm.
them for a living wage.
I mean, some people want to do that. They say, oh, I'm going to accept this from you. I would like to do something. And that's perfectly fine. But when it's a requirement, it has a different feel to it. You know,
Yeah.
when you help someone, you help out of the goodness of
Is
your
that
heart.
indentured servitude?
Right. Exactly.
Maybe. If you
Right.
put a contract on it for a certain amount of time.
Right. Exactly. My mother taught me, when you do something for someone, you do it out of the goodness of your heart and with no expectations from them.
Right.
Just
But
help them.
like making people who are at their weakest and most vulnerable moments work for food or whatever. Just come on, just help them out.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There's so many issues surrounding homelessness, and it's on the rise, unfortunately, because of rising costs. But it's been a problem for a very long time. The pandemic did make it worse. However, this problem has been happening since the rent hikes started. You know, California has the worst of the problem. Oregon, New York, Chicago, Massachusetts is in the top part of the list, as we talked about last week. And so it's a complicated issue, and where to find help is also complicated. So we hope that by providing you links to some of these organizations, it may help.
Yeah, we do not promote any specific organization. We're just giving you options. You can research the links that we put up and let us know what you think.
Yes. And coming up next, my interview with Carrie Cannon. Joining me now is activist, writer, podcaster, and advocate of following your heart, Carrie Cannon. Welcome back to the 𝐤𝐤𝐤 Show, Kerry.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's so great to reconnect with you. It's been a minute since we chatted.
Too many minutes.
Yes. So we have been doing this series about homelessness, and I kind of had this idea that it might be good to speak to someone who has some firsthand experience. And I thought of you in all of your strength. You have been through quite a lot in your life, haven't you?
Oh, yeah, more than most people know.
Right. Right, exactly. So tell me, how did you become homeless, and what has your experience been like?
Well, it's in September, it'll be 5 years. What happened is the came up for lease renewal on my apartment, and the rent was being raised significantly. I went and talked to management about the increase, and they said, well, other complexes in the area have remodeled, their rents have gone up, which, you know, caused an increase of rents in general. So without them having touched my apartment, it was raised to the point where I had to decide, am I going to work myself to death and not be there for my son, or am I going to try to live alternatively?
What kind of challenges does it present when you don't have a residence? You know, because I know lots of times I'm filling out an application for something, or, you know, trying to do something, and they want me to list my address.
It makes life pretty impossible. When you try to get a job, you need to, you know, put an address where you live at.
Right.
If all of your stuff gets stolen, including, you know, your ID and your social security card, that you can't just go to the office and have them hand you a new one. They got to mail it. Where do you have it mailed?
Right.
It sets people up for failure.
Yeah, I've heard that it's so challenging once you're in that situation. Thankfully, you haven't been on the street, but it sounds like you've had a lot of housing insecurity.
Absolutely. The RV at one point in time got broken into and destroyed beyond what we could, you know, stay in there. So we stayed in our car for quite a while.
Oh, goodness.
That was really difficult.
I bet it was. And that's you and your son.
Yes, in a Volkswagen Jetta, and you know, he's a teenager, so he's, you know, I'm trying to sleep in the driver's seat, and he's got the back seat where he could never really stretch out and rest.
Right. That's very, you know, it's heartbreaking as a mother, I would think,
Oh, absolutely. And he didn't share with me at the time. And he did after the fact that he had mental health challenges that
Hmm.
one day he actually thought about walking down to the bridge down the road and jumping off. Thank
Oh
God
my
he didn't.
gosh. Oh my gosh.
A lot of people assume that homelessness is, or that mental illness is the cause of homelessness. And in some cases, that might be true. But in
Hmm.
my experience and talking to other people, homelessness is absolutely a cause of mental illness. It takes a lot of inner strength to not let it just take you.
Right. Right. With the situation you described with your son, that's just one example of someone who, couldn't see another way out for a minute, thankfully just a minute,
Right. Thank
but
God.
right, but yeah, I think, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation, right? So um
Totally. And
yeah, mental illness is one of the things that is listed as one of the causes of homelessness. I think that does happen, but I think you're absolutely right, it happens in the reverse very often.
right. And the one thing that's, kind of helped me make it through all these years is my activism. Um, Doing something that's more important and bigger than my challenges.
Right. That's great advice also. It's not always easy to do that. I really commend you. You have your own
Not at all.
challenges day to day.
Right.
But I think you're right when you are able to still give something, because I really believe we're here to love, be loved, and be needed. And I think frequently in these situations, people kind of feel like they're the ones that are always needing, you know.
Mhm.
um,
Right.
Right. So I think it is great advice to say, when you can still give something and it will lift you up.
Right. Like I look at Lance Glore, who's, continuing his 10-year federal prison sentence for legal medical marijuana here in Washington state.
Mhm.
And, I would think about him that, I have challenges, but at least I'm free to to go to different places, to
Mhm.
still, live my life to an extent,
Right. Right.
despite my challenges. But he's like, he's caged, and
Right.
his life isn't, he's not in control of it at all.
Right. Right.
So at least
Right.
I had that still.
Well, what would you say to someone who is finding that these rising costs are just too much for them and they can't make their rent? They're newly homeless. What would you say to someone in that position right now?
Steal my mantra if it helps you, which is the words of 𝐜𝐸𝐻𝐵𝐽, master your mind, master your emotions, or find something that helps you. Your mental health, keeping that straight, keeping yourself balanced is going to be the best thing you can do to help yourself. Unfortunately, we can't rely on the different organizations out there that are set up to help the homeless, because they often don't do anything to help. They have no funds, they're limited, their
Mhm.
wait lists are years long. Um,
Right. Just like the housing lists are years long,
right.
and I'm not sure what the answer is exactly, but I think your advice is spot on. All we have is ourselves, really, at the end of the day.
Right. And, try to find yourself community, people that understand. I think the worst thing in life, regardless of what you're dealing with, is feeling like you're alone, no one cares, no one understands.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add or any information about places people can reach out to if they're looking for help?
Yeah, for homeless families, people who have kids in school, talk to your school. I was nervous too at first. I didn't know if CPS would get involved, but they didn't. There is a federal program, 𝐦𝐸𝐤𝐵𝐽, and that's to help homeless students. They gave my son a place to shower where it
Nice.
wasn't obvious to other students. They provide laundry services if needed, toiletries. They actually paid for his prom ticket, which was awesome, and
Wonderful.
his grad night ticket. So, I don't know if he could have participated in those things otherwise.
Well, I think you are amazing, Kerry, and the persistence and just, I feel like little by little we watch you, moving forward, and it may not feel that way to you even. I don't know. But
Sometimes it's difficult to see it, but I do try to ask myself, why is this happening for me instead of why is this happening to me?
wonderful. Well, thanks again for joining me.
I'm Dr. Brian Nichols, your cannabis expert for CannabisExpertMD.com with the cannabis pairing for the Edge Show. Topic this week is homelessness. Now, homelessness, it's a tremendous problem in the United States and really throughout the world. It's estimated in the U.S. that more than 1/3 of the homeless population, that means almost 300,000 people, suffer from either a substance use disorder, a psychiatric condition, or very commonly both together, as people tend to self-medicate for their psychiatric conditions using street drugs. Although many factors come into play which result in an individual becoming homeless, issues with addiction and psychiatric issues are a huge factor impeding homeless people from improving their lives. Medically assisted treatment programs such as methadone and Suboxone clinics, they are really effective at saving people's lives from opioid overdoses and getting them off of street drugs. However, you're really just replacing one narcotic addiction for another. These programs, they're very expensive. Most of the homeless population cannot afford to be enrolled in those. And even in places where there are programs for the homeless to obtain medically assisted treatment, there's issues with that. The programs have to deal with the possibility that these medications are diverted to the black market by the homeless patients simply so that they can sustain themselves or to purchase preferred drugs. So really, what is the basis of addiction? It comes down to being craving for a particular drug, the experiences that are producing. Craving is what really drives addicts to use a drug repeatedly, even after they're through withdrawal symptoms and have been clean for a time. It is what causes the relapsing that is very common in addiction. So, how can cannabis help homelessness? Well, perhaps can by addressing two of the components of drug addiction, both the anxiety and depression and the cravings experience that lead to relapse. Now, CBD, it's well known to have some antidepressant and anxiety effects. It's also been shown in animal studies and some small human trials to really decrease the cravings and decrease relapsing in opioid addicted patients. Anecdotally, just in my own clinical practice, I have noticed CBD to decrease the amount of alcohol consumption in some of my patients who have problem drinking. And I've also seen it improve recovery in some of my patients' children, really, who developed opioid use disorder. It's helped them to stay clean. The U.S. National Institute of Health, they also see the potential of CBD in treating opioid addiction. They are beginning a very large study to determine the effectiveness and dosing for treating opioid use disorder with CBD. Now, CBD has the potential to really address the root cause of addiction and relapse, which is the cravings in patients, rather than just covering up these symptoms as medically assisted treatment does. CBD has the potential to help people break this cycle of anxiety, depression, and addiction, which contributes tremendously to the homeless problem in the United States and throughout the world. Now, for you, if you're having your own issues perhaps with opioid addiction, consider adding CBD to your treatment plan to help reduce the cravings, improve depression and anxiety symptoms. A whole plant extract, it is preferred. You want to start at about 16 to 32 milligrams of a CBD tincture twice a day. You need to record all of your symptoms and progress in a journal. For anybody going through a recovery process, you realize how important journaling is to track your progress and determine your next steps of action. You should do the CBD tinctures for a week or two, then you can review your journal and see how your progress is. If you're still having significant cravings, you can increase your CBD dose by 25 to 50%. In this way, you can arrive at a dose that will help control your cravings and contribute to your recovery. For more information on all things medical cannabis, be sure to check us out at CannabisExpertMD.com. We're also available on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Gab platform and the relevant application under Cannabis Expert MD.
Hey, if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, like, and comment. If you're not on YouTube, head on over there and check out the 𝐦𝐤𝐿. Well, that was an interesting perspective from cannabis expert MD. As he pointed out, there's the other 2/3, which are homeless for many other reasons, largely often because of low wages and high rent costs.
Yeah. I just was talking to a friend the other day. I was like, if you don't mind me asking, how much is your rent going for these days? And he told me, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't seem too high. I thought it would be a lot higher. He goes, oh, but Angela, you don't know how terrible it was. And I basically had to fix up the whole thing, doing sheetrock and painting and fixing holes and electrical in an apartment in Fayetteville,
In a rental.
in a
Well,
rental unit.
mhm,
He's
yeah.
basically bartering to fix up the room for a cheaper rent, but then that landlord will be able to go and kick him out at some point when his lease is up or whatever, and then take the profit from the work that he's done on the rental and
Mhm.
hike up the rent.
Yeah, and in Arkansas, all of the laws protect the landlord, not the person who's renting. So that very likely will happen.
Yeah.
And you can pretty much kick someone out for no reason. Yeah, the situations that people find themselves in today it's so disheartening that people can't just relax and feel that sense of relief that you feel when you come home.
Right.
I think that I've talked to people who are homeless and they say that's one of the most difficult things. There's no relief in sight. You're always in fight or flight, trying to figure out if you've gonna have a roof over your head that night or not.
Right. And not to
And
mention the rising utilities.
right, for people who are housed, they are also very vulnerable, and it's a tenuous situation because the utilities are high, all of the costs have gone up. I mean, let's face it, everything from gas to childcare to
Right.
food.
Just all trying to survive on this earth.
Yes.
Cheers.
And well,
At least there's coffee and we have each other.
yes, we've got a roof over our head. We're very, very
Mhm.
fortunate.
We're very
And
privileged in that respect.
yes, and we have been in other situations in our life that were more difficult. So there's some understanding, but it's my hope that some more solutions will be found, and people like Kerry who have struggled for a long time and but persevere really
Yeah.
fill my heart, and I'm just rooting for her and for everyone like her that you'll find some stability and housing that you can afford, and so that we can continue on this journey, because it's part of our basic needs to
Mhm.
have a place to call home.
Yeah. Shelter, food,
Shelter.
water,
Yes.
healthcare,
Yes.
equality. What
Oh,
other things do you want to add to that?
oh, all of those things. Imagine if one day we didn't have to have these kinds of conversations and people felt accepted and heard and loved and have what they need. Oh, that's my hope.
Well, here's to hoping.
Yes. Well, have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
The 𝐸𝐿 is sponsored in part by the Relevant app, 131 Inclusion Gallery, 𝐦𝐤𝐤𝐬 Wellness, Lindsay Camp with Synergy One Lending,